What do you make of these blessings? Were they temporary or longer lasting?
Well, it starts off with obviously we see them down under, but amazingly they're the right way up. I never know how that works. Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Audiophiles. My name's John. His name is Andy. Let's go for a little walk under the moon of love. More on that later. But first, we have a track to listen to. Andy, what do you have for everybody to get their ear gear around today?
Well, it will be temporary blessings. Um, Perhaps the listening experience will be, kind of summed up in the same way, but that's the actual name of the act, temporary blessings. And
It's something to do with sneezing.
no, no, it isn't. uh,
Sorry.
Temporary Gesundheits, I think would have been a better name. But
Yes.
the name of the track is Fata Morgana by them. So, yeah. And this is a live performance, and it is at the Sound Park Recording in Melbourne. So, please go off, give it a spin, and come back and let us all know what you think.
Will do. Okay, so it's a nice opening. We got that really lovely drum beat that is quite reminiscent of something that Mr. James Brown might have orchestrated. And then in comes the bass as well. And then we get this kind of triumvirate of flute, sax, and vibraphone. Um, and it's like that they're all three are playing the same melody. It's one of those melodies. It's this kind of light, jazzy mixture. So a bit of jazz, acidy jazz kind of, and a bit of sort of soul-y R&B. It's this lovely, frothy, light mixture. Yeah, and it sounds like all three are playing the same melody. And it's really interesting because the vibes, the way they are, they're very sort of, the notes are hit instantly and then die in a flash. And the sax is hard to hear until it sustains the notes and you hear it coming through like the finish on a taste. So the flute's really the strongest element to my ears anyway of the three. And it's really interesting to get this start of a vibraphone, the end of the sax and the flute carrying it all the way through. And as the camera spins around, there's piano, but it's quite low in the mix. And at that point, I also noticed the sort of, I would say chopping, gently lapping guitar. That's sort of that funky guitar, sort of chicka chicka sort of type noise, which is really nice. And this opening melody is again feels familiar. It's like one of those ones that sounds like it's a question. You know, what are we going to have for brunch today? I don't know, but something like that. Nothing too deep. And then it's changed and kicked up into another melody. It seems the vibes man's taking a break, and you can hear the piano clearly putting these chords out, like almost like ladder runs, setting the parameters for this. Sounds really nice. Really, it's all about the atmosphere and the mood, and just letting your mind go blank and let it sweep over you. Yeah, it's lovely. stuff. And you'll love that. Upper run. Yeah, this is classic stuff here. I'm sorry to interrupt. I was trying not to say any more, but this is the pondering self-reflection part of a sort of jazzy instrumental where it's kind of like they're going, what are we all doing here, man? Is it really worth it? And yeah, these long chords, and just the tapping away by the drummer there is a classic. It's great, and it will then there'll be something, either drum fill or guitar or bass fill, that'll lead it back into a freshly attained groove. Good stuff. There you go. All start to strike out their own little thing. Piano's higher. Very funny. Missed off the last note. Yeah, that's a jazzy ending as well. Quite clever. Yeah, I really enjoyed that. They all play their part really nicely. It sounded great. It's nothing unbelievably new, but it's still done really well. It's all about the sort of atmosphere it creates, much as in your head as anything else. And this is really pleasant. Um, I particularly liked the vibes, man, and the flautist sounded great. I like the drummer. He wasn't quite Ginger Baker. Um, but it's decent, ginger candlestick maker. Yeah. But that groove he was doing is classic James Brown groove. And it's classic for a reason. It just there's some bits in there that just think that drum sounds so good. And it's so familiar as well. It's lovely. Um, so yeah, all in all, it's really pleasant. Always got the people actually no, I didn't even notice. So Hudson Whitlock, well done. Um, yeah, and Jethro, but Jethro, fair enough. Cassinda, Fars, Farze, yeah, they all do good. Liam, Will, Lachlan, Tom, nice one. Yeah, much enjoyed this. Need to find out a bit more about them. So let's go back and chop it up with Andy.
All right, so you have returned, John. What do you make of these blessings? Were they temporary or longer lasting?
Well, it starts off with obviously we see them down under, but amazingly they're the right way up. I've never know how that works, but anyway, so yeah, it starts with a kind of a shrug of the drums, a sort of easy over version of James Brown's Funky Drummer, um, promenading arm in arm with a velveteen wearing fat assed bass. Um, in comes a melody led by the flute and mimicked by the vibraphone and propped up by the sax. And it's quite an unusual sound, this first bit. At least three, maybe more, but at least three instruments playing the same notes. And you get this unusual sound. So the sax, I think, is playing the same notes, but you only hear the sax when it's notes on the sustain drawn out. And as is the nature of the vibraphone, its notes hit and die very quickly. Um, so it seems like everything's hanging on the flute. So you get the beginning of each note, you get a vibraphone hit, you get the flute carrying it through, and then the sax is like an aftertaste. And that's the melody going through. So it's an interesting sound. As the camera pans, we get sight of the piano again, temporary loss in the whole sort of wheelbase. But I think it's playing similar stuff. And at that point, I can hear there's this sort of rhythmic guitar action strumming away with the soft friction of a bone saw made from fuzzy felt. And we're 30 seconds into the song. So, yeah, a lot going on. Interesting. Um, it relaxes down from that initial sort of declarative melody. I said in the reaction, I think it's like it's all one of those classic sort of jazzy type things where it sounds like a question being asked at the beginning,
Mhm.
or a frame of well, here's what we are. This is what the thought is in music language, and then it sort of settles down to something more conversational. And
Mhm.
for me, it has a very familiar feel. This song is that blend which is kind of what you want, whatever you want to call it, sort of light jazz, some acid jazz in there, a little go faster stripe of funk, and then it's all tied up with a sort of R&B laces. Um, yeah. The next section, then the music goes on. The group kind of separate sound, the group sound, as it were, kind of separates out a little bit. We still get that sort of melody which is shared with the triumvirate of vibes, flute, and sax, but the vibe sort of hangs back for a little bit. Um, yeah, so the piano chords start ringing out. You can hear them very clearly, and they almost sound like ladder rungs, um, framing the conversation. Um, the flute and the sax does keep together for the most part, um, whereas the vibes man takes five to polish his beta or whatever. We do get some lovely little embellishments at the end of the phrases. These flute flutterings, the equivalent of jazz hands, at the end of a line. Um, but they do sound intricate, and it kind of always puts me in mind. I don't know why, but it puts me in mind of little wooden carvings of like you see on the edge of like church pews, a little mice or little birds or something. It just feels like that sort of detail. Back comes the vibes into this very circular conversation of this part of the melody. It goes round the corner and up the stairs again as it sort of raises in tone slightly. And then we get this very nice little guitar picking, which just hinges the phrases together in between. and off we go again. It's all very laid back. It's more continental breakfast roast coffee as opposed to pure Robusta beans. It's all about the atmosphere really that it creates in your brain as as your mind stretches out and thinks about the things that you won't be doing today. And this is sort of, instrumental that I really appreciate. Um, we go round the block again. Um, so we get fluttering, tone rise, vibes, guitar pick hinging. And then with a slight little flute snarl that has all the threat of a wrong burgundy jazz flute, we enter into the breakdown zone briefly. Um, James Brown drum beats again that sound classic for a reason because they bloody are. Um, we go back into the main phrase with some very delicate alterations. I think at this point, vibraphone and piano have switched their positions in terms of their attack now. I think now the piano is definitely mimicking this main melody, and the strikes and the vibes are now more emphasizing strikes rather than underlining the melody of each note. And he's hitting like three at a time, and so yeah, it's just slight tinkering with their form, as with is common with the sort of gentler arm of jazz. The music starts to slow down to ponder its own form, this sort of navel gazing. Um, so you get this sense of introspection. The notes and the chords are formed with care and deliberation as they get slower and sort of more strung. Um, Before we get a couple of moments, silent reflection, uh, and then the bass calls everyone into order. And we go off again. It's classic stuff, but it's done really well.
Yeah.
So we get more funky drummer and more funky guitar, um, and we get bass noodling at its most prominent here. He does do little noodles all throughout the song, actually, which I said I'm sure you would love. But we really notice in this part, and it's like at this point the other instruments are almost break free from their respective shackles. The piano's pounding some much higher range notes and chords. Sounds really nice. The flute is threatening to fly off at the end of each into the sunset. And even the vibe man is striking out his own notes rather than within that framework of that melody. And just as we get this glimpse of this new idea, this new dynamic, we get a smart ass 2 out of a 3 note close and it all cuts off. Oh, and they're looking very pleased with themselves that we were waiting for that last note and it didn't come.
Yeah.
Proper cut off on your prime, quirky jazz ending. So yeah, I thought this was really fun. I really enjoyed it. Lovely sound to it. I keep I keep forgetting this was a live performance because you kind of almost expect this is how these bands exist,
Yeah.
almost not in the studio but live, and so it's taken for granted. But it's a great performance as well.
Sure.
I thought they all did a great job. I love. I just said the reaction. I love the sort of the nonchalance of the drummer. Not quite Ginger Baker. He's more Ginger Candlestick Maker, but he still did a great job. I was quite pleased with that one. There's I was looking. I've only got them on CD and they're not here. So there's a series of albums issued called Digging Deeper: The Roots of Acid Jazz. I've actually got them in the vault, so bear with me a second. There's some really interesting. I think I have 3 of them. Various artists. Here we go. Bear with me 1 second. Anyway, yeah, all 3 albums are great, and they have some very interesting tracks on here. And this track reminds me of one of them off here. I know which ones it isn't, but I can't remember which one it is that sounds like this. I mean, not a copy, but just has the same feel and overall. But these albums, they have like, I mean, the first one's fantastic. It's got Pastime Paradise by Barretto. Am I Black Enough for You by Billy Paul, which is a fantastic song. As I was practicing Flüster by Diato. Bill Withers, Kissing My Love. Esther Phillips, Home is Where the Hatred Is.
Hmm.
George Benson's jazz guitar version of So What, Miles Davis. It goes on and on. There's some Ramsey Lewis, some Lonnie Liston Smith. And it all ends up with Antonio Carlos Jobin's, or maybe Joachim, version of Brazil. You know, you know, oh, really awesome stuff. I would recommend anyone's interested in this sort of roots of acid jazz and where it all came from. Highly recommend that series of albums called Digging Deeper. And this reminds me of some of the elements of that as well. It's got a slightly it does have a modern touch to the sound. It doesn't feel rooted in the 70s, um, but really pleasant. Yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed it. And obviously, I guess from there that these guys are um, from the down under. But
Yes.
yeah, tell us more about them because it's
Yeah,
really
of course.
interesting.
Of course. I'm glad that you liked them. Given your penchant for like solid instrumentals, stuff that has a touch of acid jazz or some R&B sounds to it, I assumed you would not only identify those bits but also really enjoy them. And when these guys came onto my radar, I don't know, 5 months ago maybe, I knew that I needed to bring them to the channel and give them to you. So really glad that it went over so well. So yeah, Temporary Blessings is the new project led by stalwart Melbourne trumpet player and composer Liam McGorry. Go ahead, John.
Got to say, at the end of the reaction, I paused it and I'm going on about, well, I enjoyed him and I enjoyed him. And then I looked up and on the screen in big letters was the names of all the people. I was like, oh, okay,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah,
So she's called Keister or something like that. And there was a guy called, I can't remember the names now, but yeah. I thought it
yeah.
was really funny. That was going on about them and there with their names there in
Yeah, you
big
had a whole
letters.
cast list in front
Yeah,
of you.
yeah,
If only I had a cheat sheet to tell me. Yeah, yeah. So they were assembled to realize McGorry's compositions, drawing on 1960s Italian and French soundtrack music. Temporary Blessings brings together trusted instrumentalists and fellow travelers from Melbourne's rich enclave of cinematic soul. With Liam at the helm, the group is composed of members of Surprise Chef, Karate Boogaloo, Sasquatch, and Let Your Hair Down, which are all other Melbourne area bands. So yeah, there you go.
names,
Some of
great
those names
names.
are great.
Yeah.
Those members and rotating and other rotating members include Liam McGorry on trumpet and piano, Hudson Whitlock on drums, Tom Pettit on bass, Lachlan Stuckey on guitar, Jethro Curtin on vibraphone, love that. Will Morrissey on saxophone, Casinda Fosse on flute, and Katarzyna Wittorski on piano, easy for me to say. Sam Boone on string arrangements, Zachary Johnston violin, Phoebe Green viola, and Campbell Banks on cello. But to be specific, as it relates to the members playing on this specific performance, the lineup included, and John caught it there at the very end, McGorry, Whitlock, Pettit, Stuckey, Curtin, Morrissey, and Fosse. The band's sound is inspired by film noir, giallo, library music, and cinematic soul. Their debut album, on which this track, Fata Morgana, features, is entitled Sumbisori, and was released on December 5th of 2025 via College of Knowledge Records. The album's title is Korean and it translates to the sound of breathing. The recordings produced by Henry Jenkins bring together emotive string arrangements, tough horns, and steadfast rhythm sections with an acute attention to detail. Of the performing and recording process, McGorry says, I find great comfort in collaborating with good friends and playing music together in the same room and taking these blessings as they come. And perhaps that quote best sheds light on what inspired the band's name, Temporary Blessings. So it looks to me like this is perhaps at least for now, a fleeting project, as he refers to these blessings of collaboration as temporary. But it would be great if they could occasionally get together and put out more works because this album is really interesting and has. This is a great, I think, that like dip into the waters of what this album is, and it's a great just put on, and like for me, this would be a great long drive album because I could just put this in and just get lost in the music, and the next thing you know, 50 minutes is up, and you're like, oh shit, that was fucking great. Um, so yeah, according to Coal Mine Records, A veteran of Melbourne soul, McGorry's steady hands have touched some of the city's most revered projects over the last 15 years. McGorry led projects Sasquatch, Dorsal Fins, and Ex Olympian sit aside Sampa the Great, Ella Thompson, and Adrian Eagle on Liam's heavy list of credits and collaborators. He has contributed more than his fair share of bricks to the great structure of Melbourne soul, always playing in the background, true to his humble nature. And Christopher Hunold previewed the album for HHV Mag and wrote, Sumbisori is an instrumental, soul-inflected brass spectacle that draws inspiration from several decades of film music. At the same time, it is a deliberate response to what has already been done. McGorry spent many years playing and leading indie rock bands such as Dorsal Fins and funk rock projects like Sasquatch. But at some point, every story runs its course. Who wants to be served their favorite meal every single day until it becomes indigestible? A new band was needed. With temporary blessings, McGorry and his collaborators look back in order to move on, adding, guided by a fondness for classic giallo films and European cinema of the 1960s and 70s, Italo soul, and crime soundtracks, epic strings, delicately played pianos, and sun drenched horns jostle and swirl their way through the Australians' 10 tracks, always finding a rhythm that carries an unmistakable sense of elegance. Ed Lindsay of Wordplay magazine wrote of the album, recorded live with a dream team of Melbourne players from Surprise Chef, Karate Boogaloo, Sasquatch, and Let Your Hair Down. The album captures what McGorry calls a shared spirit, cinematic and soulful in equal measures. With Sumbisori, temporary blessings turn their collective gaze to the silver screen of the imagination, and it's one worth watching. The track's title, Fata Morgana, is Italian for Fairy Morgan, referring to the Arthurian sorceress who is blamed for creating complex, shifting mirages, particularly over the Strait of Messina. It stems from the Italian fata, fairy or fate, and morgana, Morgan, with origins linked to tales of magical castles in the air used to deceive sailors. And Robin Murray of Clash magazine wrote a piece on this specific track, the album's first of three singles. Fata Morgana is the project's debut offering, and it's a lush, intoxicating feast of instrumental soul. There's something in the Melbourne waters, for sure. So, there you have it, John. Don't have any lyrics to go over, as you could probably imagine. Go ahead, sir.
No, there's a couple of interesting points there. So one, had I don't know where the hell it is now. I don't know why I'm looking at my shelves because it's not there. I had a CD that was the music from uh, Cinecittà, which is an Italian film studio, and it was music from the 50s, 60s, and 70s, and various levels of appreciation. Some of it was just really naff. Some of it
Yeah.
was quite cool. But it had that sort of European. There was a lot of that sort of music to it, which is very 60s and very upbeat. But yeah, it's interesting they're taking sort of I would guess if you're verging into the 70s and those sort of exploitation type films. I know there's a rich history of the music from that. Curtis Mayfield in America, etc. Doing all that sort of stuff, and Marvin Gaye as well. Yeah, so that's really interesting. And then the idea of Morgana being an Italian legend as well is really interesting. Because I only know her from sort of La Morte d'Arthur and the half
Of
sister of
course.
Arthur and all that. So
Yeah.
yeah, to have her being suddenly appear in this Italian fable is just it's quite wild, really, to think.
Yeah, that's something that I found surprising too, and didn't real as an American, surely didn't think would have
Yeah.
translated, or that myth would have reached Italy, or if it did, had
Mm.
been absorbed, it feeling like into their
Yeah,
culture
yeah.
as well in a way. Because I've always associated anything with like Morgan and anything Arthurian to be Ireland and the United Kingdom, and not, mainland Europe. But hey, every day's a school day. I thought that was really interesting too, as somebody who loves mythology and folklore and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, really, really cool. It also reminded me of his approach. Was I thought there's something akin to this the Danielle Lupi, who had worked with Jack White on the song that we did, Two Against One, where a lot of their inspiration had come from different movements within film. And with each album, he would tap into this different timeline in cinematic music and then create a more modern album based off that sound or inspired by that sound. This, I think, is more connected and less like cherry picked than Lupi's approach, but nonetheless, it's still the same. It's still the same mindset of like, here's this area of music that I want to inspire what I do moving forward with this new thing. So I thought that was really interesting too. But yeah, this is a lot of fun to listen to, man.
Yeah. It's
Because
interesting how people also perceive things differently as well. As you said that they said their inspiration, one of their inspirations is film noir. Um, and for me, film noir, I think of 40s in particular, and sort of messy versions of that sort of classic jazz, that sort of Miles Davis, quartet, the really, Birth of the Call, etc.
yeah,
Um, that sort of, jazz that's quite sort of hard edged, um, like the good men and women of those films as well.
yes, absolutely, absolutely.
And this is more, I think, stretching into sort of like I say, it's like 60s, 70s, really. The bit more sort of musically softer, but a bit more sort of potentially seedier as well.
Yeah,
Not
yeah,
in
yeah,
this
yeah.
case, but it's kind of got the thing there.
Yeah, it's
Um,
almost like a
uh,
wolf in sheep's clothing sort of situation in musical form, right? Like, what is beneath this? So
Yeah,
yeah,
and when you hear vibraphone, you immediately think Roy Ayers, and his sort of stuff as well.
yeah,
So it's really nice to hear.
awesome, man. Well, I'm really, really glad that you enjoyed this one, buddy. And I got to
Definitely.
thank my friend. He'll never see this, but my friend Chris is the one who pointed me in the direction of this and was like, "Man, you got to check this out." Like, I could see this being sampled, by like rap artists and toyed around with and sort of played as and sampled, and I was like, you know what, you're probably right, man. And I
Yeah,
listened to it wholly and I was like, oh, this is just a really good fucking album in and of itself. He was like, yeah, I'm telling you, man. So shout out Chris, thank you for pointing me in the direction of this. If you ever see it, there you go. That's the only thanks you're ever going to get from me. Guys out there in the listening audience,
true
please
friend.
let us know. That's the kind of friendship we have. Please let us know what you thought of Temporary Blessings and this track Fata Morgana. And if you enjoyed it, please go out and check the album, but let us know what your thoughts are down below. And if there's other stuff akin to this that maybe isn't on our radar, but that deserves or warrants being checked out on the channel, feel free to shout out those suggestions down below and we will add it to the list. All that out of the way, please like, share, and or subscribe if you haven't done any or all of those things. Just cost you a couple clicks and would mean the world to us. So thank you in advance to anyone who entertains that request. And hopefully John and I will catch all y'all in growing numbers on the next installment of the Audiophiles. We'll see you later, guys.